Hi! In today's video I want to share 7 elements that I've learned and used when I play Café jazz. For several years I used to play at a restaurant, sometimes alone and sometimes I played with others. My favorite ensemble was to play with a trio with bass and drums, and the good thing about playing in a bar or cafe or restaurant is that you can vary between playing ballads to more up-tempo tunes, playing jazz standards and your own compositions. This particular tune is one of my compositions called Let It Rain. The title is inspired by my hometown Bergen in Norway, where it rains a lot. Did you know that it can rain more than 270 days per year in Bergen? That is 75% rainy days. And then you might think, what do the people of Bergen do when it rains that much? And the answer is, they just let it rain. Since there are so many things that you can do depending on the tune that you're playing, let's now narrow it down to the tune Let It Rain. Also, the approach I used when I composed the tune is also one of many, but one that I find to be very useful when you compose music for café jazz. So again, here are 7 tips. Tip number 1. Get rid of the typical jazz formula, so instead of presenting the melody once and then you play a solo above the chord changes and then you present the melody again, now you can create a composition that starts at one point and ends a completely other point, where you play some that is improvised and some that is rehearsed. In other words, and here's tip number 2, let the melody be the glue of your composition. So what I mean by that is that you make your melody just a small little snippet and then you come back to that melody throughout your composition. So in the tune Let It Rain, I played the melody snippet at least 20 times during my composition, where I sometimes play the melody snippet in major and sometimes in minor. Another thing that you can do is to play the melody in different keys. So I started out in the key of E flat, and then I went through, for example, key of B flat, the same idea, just transposed. And by the way, when you play with a bass player, you should of course not play big chords like this, but more like this. So now it's a rootless voicing, so I don't play the root for the most part, and sometimes you can play the root too, as long as you're not stepping on the bass player's toes. The tune Let It Rain is a ballad, so when you play a ballad like this, then you should let the melody stand out and don't play too loud, and of course also make your harmony stand out. And that leads us to the next tip, which is tip number 3, and that is to sometimes just play chords. And one chord that I like to add is the minor 13 voicing, where you play on every other key. And by the way, I also made a video about that, so you can check that out later if you like. So I add that on purpose during my composition and make it a part of my composition. Tip number 4, you can play block chords. Briefly what it is that you play the melody in octaves and then you add chord notes underneath. So you get this tight sound. So you can either do that by playing the melody in block, like that, or you can just add block chords like an effect, like this. Tip number 5 is to add some open spaces. You don't have to play all the time on a consistent basis. If you make music, it's all about creating contrasts. So if you have been playing a lot of notes for a while, it's very cool to take a little break and make some open spaces and let the instruments ring and play themselves just by holding the notes. Let me show you one example in my tune where I played a little busy first, and then you calm it down and just play open chord and let everything ring. Tip number 6, you can add some syncopations in your composition. What I like to do is to add some syncopations where everyone is playing the syncopations simultaneously. And you can also even arrange some pauses where everyone completely stops playing for just a moment. Tip number 7. Keep your improvisation simple. In a tune such as the tune Let It Rain, it is not needed to have that much of classical improvisation where you play many fancy lines with your right hand over the chord changes. And the reason is that the chords are constantly changing, and then you can connect the dots for the listener by repeating your melodic ideas. The second reason is that the composition itself was improvised, so the whole composition, Let It Rain, is completely improvised from start to finish. In other words, what I played for you was not rehearsed. And if you want to learn more about how I made the composition and how you can make a similar composition, then you can click the link in the description. There you can also find a complete walkthrough and analysis of the elements that I used throughout the tune Let It Rain, as well as you can get the tune as a PDF file, and then you can get the play along track that I used in this video. I think it is a fine tune to play over, and it's also a relatively easy one to play. Anyway, for now, let me play for you the tune from start to finish. So now imagine that you are sitting in a cafe in one of the rainiest days in one of the rainiest cities. At the cafe there is a jazz band playing. Then you realize that life is not that bad if you just let it rain.